Hi. Thank you for coming. My name is State Representative John Lesch. This is Senator Lang.
Good morning.
We are co-sponsoring a bill that we will be putting in the hopper on the first day of session. And this bill will insist that counties offer differential pay for deployed service members of whatever branch, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Marines. The reason for this is because Minnesota, starting with the first Minnesota Volunteer Infantry Regiment at Gettysburg, has a rich tradition of soldiers honorably serving their nation when called to do so. And public employees that deploy are valued, talented, and dedicated folks, many of whom make an extra sacrifice of serving in our armed forces while they're also serving their state and local communities in Minnesota. They put their professional lives on hold, their families on hold, while they take on whichever mission is put in front of them. And this can be difficult on loved ones in many ways, including and especially financially. So they should be able to, and every commander wants to ensure that these soldiers focus solely on the mission. When you've got soldiers thinking about problems back home, whether they're personal or financial, they're not able to focus on their mission. We, as a state legislature, are obligated to pass policy that remedies that so that these soldiers, these service members, can honorably serve and focus solely on the mission and do their duty. Now, both public and private employers have recognized the difference and this difficulty in this balance. And so in the wake of 9/11 and the global war on terror, state employees have been given differential pay to make up for lost income in order to serve. Folks know that service members don't get paid very much money. So if you happen to have served in your public job, state or local, for a while, and you're making more money, and you staring down the barrel of a 365-day or longer deployment, you're looking at a substantial decrease in pay for serving your country and doing your duty, going above and beyond, getting paid less. That's not the way it should be. And that's why so many local units of government, including counties, cities, school districts in the state of Minnesota, offer differential pay to make up for that pay that would be lost while on a Title X deployment. So the next logical step is to require Minnesota counties to do this. The original reason why I brought this bill is because of multiple folks that brought up soldiers who are deployed right now as part of Operation Spartan Shield in Kuwait currently. And many of our service members, especially in the Minnesota Army National Guard, have deployed to Kuwait over the course of the Minnesota War on Terror. And one of them is Major Ayodele Famodu, okay? Major Famodu is a JAG officer, and Major Famodu works as a prosecutor for the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. And Major Famodu is the primary breadwinner for her family, and she is going to make substantially less money doing her duty, being deployed for over a year in the sands of Kuwait, than she would be in her role as a prosecutor for the people of Minnesota on behalf of the state of Minnesota as a Ramsey County employee. This needs to be addressed. Now, Major Famodu is not the only employee that's going to be suffering on this deployment, but she is one who had the courage to come forward and say, listen, I need to address this for myself, but also for my fellow service members who stand to lose substantially, potentially lose a home and suffer substantial financial consequences directly because of my deployment and because my county does not offer this differential pay. I want to address this for Major Famodu, but also for all of the unspoken veterans, service members, deployed service members under Title X who are suffering but just aren't in a position to have the courage to come forward at this time. As a person who was a prosecutor, I was a prosecutor for the city of St. Paul for 15 years. And I had that differential pay protection, prosecuting gross misdemeanors and misdemeanors. But Major Famodu does not, as a Ramsey County employer, prosecuting felonies. in the same courthouse, under the same judges, in the same building. That's wrong. We want to address that as a state, and I hope that we'll be able to do that with this bill. These families should not have to suffer a financial setback due to a deployment. With that, I'd like to introduce you to Senator Lang, who can discuss his experience as a member of the Minnesota National Guard.
Well, good morning, and thanks to everybody for coming today, and thanks to Representative Lesch for the work he's done on this. You know, he called me just a day after the election, or 2 days after the election, and said, listen, I got an issue I want to talk to you about. And I believe that you sought me out solely from my experience in the National Guard. You know, I just want to say thanks to him. Thanks for shedding light on this topic, and hopefully we're off to a good start. Like he said, I'm serving in my 17th year of the Minnesota Army National Guard. You know, I've had 2 deployments to Iraq, both times actually. It was supposed to be a Kuwaiti deployment, and a little group called ISIS decided they were going to stick their head up, and I went a couple hundred miles further north and spent the rest of the time in Iraq. So, you know, John and I are both current. I think you're current.
No,
are you retired? Oh, wow.
I'm retired.
I'm sorry, I'm not up on my statistics so well, right. But John is also a member of or former member of the Minnesota Army National Guard, as well as I. You know, I'm very proud of my service. The years I spent in the military, the proud service the military, you know, gives me and some of my fellow service members. You know, the military is many things. It's a proud brother and sisterhood of service members. They're the consummate professionals that provide the service for our great nation. You know, I love serving them. I'm going to try to go past my 20 years and put as much time in as I can. You know, the organization, the Minnesota Army National Guard, comes together from ordinary, everyday citizens that have signed on the dotted line. They've given their rights up somewhat to serve us and to protect us. In all that, during the deployments, they don't expect much in return. They don't expect much in pay. They don't expect much when it comes to you know, what the state provides them. So the National Guard is also a few other things. It's really hard on families. The time I spend either National Guard drill weekends. That's 1 weekend a month I don't get to spend with my kids and my wife. We have our 2 weeks in the summer. It's the same deal. And when we go on a deployment, it's very hard on our employers. It's very hard on all those relationships we have, trying to build our careers, trying to build ourselves out in a meaningful and hopeful way. It's, you know, the one thing that I don't think John touched on, but the recruiting and retention when it comes to Minnesota Army National Guard has always been somewhat of an issue. How do you recruit new people to come in? How do you ensure that when they do deploy that they're going to keep their job, they're going to keep their pay, they're not going to be financially hurt in any way, shape, or form? So what this bill does, it's a pretty simple bill. It just says the counties, when your service members are deployed, you're going to compensate them to an equal level. And when they come back, they're going to step right in. They're not going to lose out on any advancement, any encouragement. So with that being said, I don't know if you want to take any questions at this point. I'm sure willing to.
We can take some questions. Before we take questions, I did want to state one thing, okay? Major Famodu was, like I stated, very courageous in coming forward on this. She did not give me this photo. I found this online, okay? Service members who are deployed are under substantial scrutiny by the chain of command when their name comes up in the media, okay? And Major Famodu did give me the permission to use her name in the quote in the press release, but I want to make it clear that use of this photo was not authorized or sanctioned by Major Famodu in any way. We did ask for a supportive quote from the Minnesota National Guard, and I think they were operating a little slowly. So the quote that we have, did it come from the National Guard, or we don't know that yet?
No.
Okay, it didn't. So the gears move slowly, and especially when there's sand in the gears like the Santa Kuwait. So that just to make that clear, that there is no specific statement in support or opposition from the Guard on this. I'd assume that the Guard would be supportive of their soldiers on that with continuing the mission. But with that, any questions? Yes.
So explain to me, when you say
different counties do this different, so it's like a patchwork all over the state as to which counties provide the differential pay and which don't.
That's correct.
And private, there's no mandate on a private company. They don't have to do anything they want.
That's correct.
So what this bill would do essentially would be
Financial.
to make it uniform in the public sector, not the private. You can't do anything about that. Is that essentially right?
That's correct. Well, there are two laws. There's the law affecting, and what's it called again? The
Soldiers and Sailors Act?
Yeah, well, Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act, but also the law specifically applying to what can be done. And it's much more difficult to enforce that with respect to private employers. With public employers, there are clear protections in terms of you getting your job back when you return. But with the specifically differential pay, yes, this says nothing about private employers. Yeah.
Oh, dear God, did you?
Well, it only applies to public, not only public, but this only applies to counties for now.
It won't be a statewide.
It will be statewide as applied to counties. State employees already have it as a part of state law. It does not guarantee municipal employees that right, but a lot of the municipalities, not all, but Minneapolis-St. Paul, they offer differential pay. Like I was a St. Paul employee. I got differential pay for that.
How much money is there a price tag on this bill? I mean, it'll cost something? I mean, how will it?
Well, as of right now, we're waiting on the fiscal. So as of this morning, I sent the fiscal in. We will get a fiscal note. I'm assuming, and this is, between discussions between John and myself, the number of employees this adversely affects is actually fairly small. So it may seem like a small number, but for those individuals, and some of these individuals are the highly paid, highly qualified people that the Guard is trying to pursue. Those are the ones we want to recruit. Those are the ones we want to retain further into the year, further into their years of service. So how do you do that? You maintain their rate of pay, that they don't financially, be hurt by a deployment, especially in the advancement of their career. So.
That's right. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your time. We'll be introducing this bill at the beginning of session, and I have no doubt we'll get hearings immediately and think it will be smooth and bipartisan. You will not continue the release